Rolling Stone! Rolling Stone!
Daytona USA was a launch game for the Sega Saturn released in 1995. A year and a half later, its sequel was released, Daytona USA Championship Circuit Edition. Both were based on the Daytona USA arcade game that was one of the most popular cabinets in the 1990s. It features 3 courses, and a quarter of the beginner track kind of resembles the real-world speedway the game is named after. The cars are actual stock cars, but other than that, this is just a wacky Sega racing game, not a NASCAR game. Tracks will have you passing by a huge city, an airport, a space shuttle, a giant statue of a character from Virtua Fighter, and a carved monument of Sonic the Hedgehog. There is only one car with automatic or manual transmission. Racing action is super fast, and mastering drifting is difficult but extremely rewarding. It's chaotic in the best way. You are always weaving through other cars, and the physics felt as good as they could for the time. Its soundtrack is iconic, featuring Takanobu Mitsuyoshi's joyful vocals. Hearing Rolling Start as you commence the beginner track has become a seminal gaming moment. Let's Go Away is a classic. The music embodies the delight Daytona delivers in every aspect. Daytona USA was the first game to use Model 2 arcade hardware, which allowed for graphics that easily surpassed its rival Ridge Racer, not to mention virtually every other arcade game at the time. It also ran at a consistent 60 frames per second, which just enhanced the look and feel of gameplay. Sega had a technical marvel of a game that was the king of the arcade. With Daytona at its apex of popularity, and Sega releasing a home console, there couldn't be a more serendipitous combination for Sega. How could that possibly go wrong? Well, Daytona USA and the Sega Saturn is a rushed technical nightmare. The graphics and performance are so bad that it breaks the gameplay. Frames per second is so low that it makes control difficult. Combine that with overly twitchy controls, and you never feel as in control of the car as you do in the arcade. Polygon pop-in was a fact of life in the 1990s. Even the arcade game had some. Virtually every 3D game released at the time had it. But Daytona USA's on the Sega Saturn was so bad and so close that sometimes you can't see the upcoming turns in time. Sometimes the track pops in, then out, then back in. Its textures are low-res and chunky, as is typical for Saturn games. This was never going to look as good as it did in the arcade, but it could have come a lot closer. But you can sense the great gameplay that is buried underneath these technical issues. Ridge Racer on the PlayStation may have only had one track, but its smooth racing and clean look still makes it a much more enjoyable experience, even if it's shorter. As far as presentation, Daytona USA is as direct a port as you can find. The game boots directly into an arcade loop. The Course Select and Mission Select screens are exactly the same as the arcade. The same courses and cars are there. There are Grand Prix and Endurance modes where you can race with huge lap counts. They added a Saturn mode with an extra car and no checkpoint system. Compared to Ridge Racer, this game has an encyclopedia's worth of content. Unfortunately, that content was based on massively flawed gameplay. If there was ever a game that could get away with a sequel so shameless and limited in scope as Ridge Racer Revolution was, Daytona USA was it. Fix the frames per second and improve the pop-in situation, and you finally brought home a reasonable facsimile of the arcade game. So how did they do? Well, that's a bad sign. Luckily, Daytona USA Championship Circuit Edition doesn't stop at only addressing the technical faults of the original. The 3 courses from the original are back, along with 2 additional tracks that are just as high quality. 6 additional cars are also included. The Saturn mode from the original is gone, replaced with a time attack mode and a multiplayer mode. The frame rate is much improved, even if it still doesn't match the arcade. It has its moments of inconsistency, but it allows for more stable overall gameplay. The control has also been tweaked to be less twitchy. The pop-in is still bad, but improved to the point where it doesn't impact gameplay. Textures are clearer, which makes for better looking cars and tracks. While Namco was fine with doing as little as possible in Ridge Racer Revolution, Sega felt like they needed to iterate everything to justify a new purchase. Unfortunately, that included the iconic soundtrack. Let's Go Away has been replaced with generic butt rock in the arcade loop. The other music tracks are still there, but remixed in a way that minimizes the joyful vocals. They also changed the design of the cars for the worse. By finally capturing the gameplay of the arcade original, Daytona USA Championship Circuit Edition became one of the best games ever released on the Sega Saturn. The contrast between these two games and the first two Ridge Racers is very interesting. Ridge Racer was clearly a superior racing game at launch that more closely matched its arcade counterpart. But Daytona's sequel not only adapted itself better to the home market, it improved itself in areas where it was already stronger than Ridge Racer. Moving forward, the Ridge Racer series would find its way, while Sega released the Daytona USA sequel in the arcade that never came to the home. And that was it for the Daytona franchise.